We are continuing in the book of the Tzemach Tzedek called Sefer Halikutim, Dach Tzemach Tzedek, in the volume that contains part of the letter Aleph, Umot, haOlam, the nations of the world. We are in the middle of page Tov, Kuf, Tov, Gimel, which would be 523. In the middle of the second section, and just to recap and bring us up to where we are holding. So based on different midrashim on different verses, so we say that at the beginning of creation, it says that the world was tohu, simply translated as chaos. And the Medrash says that's referring to the deeds of the wicked, because they come from a spiritual world which is called tohu. And then we have the story of how there was the breaking of the vessels from that very, very high world, and then those very, very holy sparks of holiness of those vessels fell down, and then they ultimately need to be extracted and redeemed and elevated. Then it says, after the verse, the second verse that says that the world was tohu, then it says that Hashem said, "Let there be light." And the Medrash interprets that refers to the deeds of the righteous. In other words, Kabbalistically speaking, that would be the world of tikkun, of rectification. So first we have tohu, which that's explicit in the verse. And then we have the world of tikkun, which is referred to as or, as light. And then the Medrash asks an interesting question. And it presents and says, I don't know which one Hashem prefers. Does he want the deeds of the wicked, or does he want the deeds of the righteous? And then we say that actually, how do we know that he wants the deed of the righteous? Because it then says that Hashem saw that everything is toiv me'oid. He saw that the light is good, and then we're explaining that what are the wicked. So the wicked are not just people that go against Hashem's will, because then the question doesn't even make sense. But we're saying that the wicked, the Rishayim, actually have a very, very high source, because they are from this world of tohu. And then we connected that also with Paroi, the king of Egypt, which represents the most intense klipa, the most intense cover and opposition to godliness. So that king Paroi is the same letters backwards as the word haOref, which is the back of the neck, the stiff, stubborn part, meaning that the flow of godly energy that the wicked receive is from a very high level, which is called Erech Apayim, which we connected here, as well as many other pieces that we've learned previously, to the level of Keser, coming from the external part of Keser, and it's coming, though, in an indirect way, and that's not what Hashem wants to give in a pnimius, in a way of his face or in his inner will. But in order to receive from Hashem's pnimius, from Hashem's inner and true will, if you will, that would be through tzimtzum, through contractions, through concealing, through hiding. And that Hashem's essence, he then filters, so to say, and encloses it in the 10 spheroids, which they are lower than Keser, but that's the only way, generally speaking, that we receive from Hashem in the proper form. And that would be, it comes into Chachma and Bina, and that's the meaning of what it says, that Hashem saw, Vayar Elikim, that the light is kitov, that it's good. So from that, the Medrash concludes that now we know that Hashem truly wants and desires the deeds of the righteous. Okay. All right, so that we connected with the idea of Vayar Elikim, that Hashem saw. Now, the word Vayar, that Hashem sees, vision, seeing, is connected to Chachma, which is the first of the 10 spherois, which is after the contraction. And Chachma is generally represented by the Yud of Hashem's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, that the Yud is Chachma, and that's lower than and after Keser. But that's really where it begins after the Tzimtzum. So that's Vayar Elikim, that Vayar is the idea of Chachma, which is the idea of seeing. Okay, so let's go now to the last word on the line, Vizehu. It's approximately 14 lines from the bottom. 12 or 13 lines from the bottom. Last word on the line, Vizehu. Vizehu Einei Hashem El Tzadikim. This is the meaning that we have a verse that says that the eyes of Hashem are to the righteous. Meaning, explains the Tzemach Tzedek. Bechinas Einei, this aspect of the eyes, upnimius, that's the inner dimension. Ki b'makim shadam roye umistakel, where a person sees and is looking and gazing, al derech mashal, by way of an analogy, sham ikar pnimis, that's the main innermost. Sort of what the expression that the eyes are the window to the soul. So even though the face is panim, and that represents pnimis, but which part of the face in particular can you actually see? That's really the eyes. Not only do the eyes see, but when one looks at a person's face, the depth is really in the eyes. It's not, on your nose. The depth is in the eyes. So this idea of the eyes of Hashem, that is particularly and specifically to the righteous. Because otherwise, for the Rishayim, they don't receive from Einei Hashem, but as we said, they're getting from much higher, but it's an indirect way, and it's not what Hashem truly wants. But like we keep on bringing in the analogy of throwing over the shoulder out of a feeling of either responsibility, but not truly, really wanting to do it. Vizehu, and this is the meaning of Vayar Elikim, that Hashem saw, referring again to the verse that says that Hashem saw that the light was good. Shenimshach lislabesh b'vchinas re'iyah, that this godly light and energy comes down to be enclosed in a fashion of re'iyah, of vision. Azai, so then, ha'or dafka kitov, it is specifically when it's vayar elikim, when godliness is in a way of seeing, then the light, specifically the light, is good. Masha'en kain, which is not the case. Kishenimshach mi bechinas achirayim, when it's coming down in a way of from the backside, like we said, paroi, the back of the neck, or the idea of the opposite of the face, like throwing over the shoulder. Azai, then, adayin, still, eini yoidea, I don't know, in the language of the Medrash, be'eze mehem chafetz, in which one he wants, because as long as Hashem is not facing you, as long as his eyes allegorically are not upon you, so then I don't know what he wants. Does he desire the deeds of the righteous or of the wicked? Because it's coming in a way that is from the backside. V'ila zois, and therefore, bechinas paroi, this element or level which is represented by paroi, v'oivdei kechavim, and the idolaters, that their nourishment, their sucking from godliness is from the backside. Similar to the concept that we've mentioned a number of times, that this little spider, or whatever, the little insect, is so irrelevant and it's based on a verse that the idea there is that in the king's chamber, in his palace, in his inner chamber, in a tiny little corner, if there's a little tiny spider or whatever insect over there that doesn't make a big deal, the king could care less about it. So therefore, yes, it's in the palace, it's in the highest level, but the king could care less about it. So that's the idea of Hashem granting and giving sustenance and giving all riches and wealth and success to the idolaters, to those that are wicked. It's because he's not doing it directly, and therefore he, so to say, could care less. Bohem shayich bechina hanal. So when it comes to them, we can speak about this level of the shemamis. Sheyelem ashpa, that they, the Rishoyim, the wicked ones, the idolaters, they should get a flow of energy. Al yidei bechinas harava hanal, through this level of what we said at the top of the of this piece. We brought a verse that says leman spois harava, in order to quench the thirst of the one that's thirsty. So harava is literally, it means the one that's thirsty, or quenching the thirst of the thirsty. So there, they're receiving from the level of vadain ein bezem chafetz. In other words, we're taking the words of the Medrash, and here we're explaining it in Hasidus that itself is a level. See, oftentimes when a statement is made, so the simple meaning and translation of the statement is like a question, but comes along Hasidus and says, no, that itself is a truth, is a statement. For example, there are many such examples, but for example, we have in Pirkei Avos, the beginning of, I think, chapter 5. So it says that the world was created in 10 statements. And then the Mishnah says, V'haloi b'maimer echad yachol libaros. But behold, it could have been created with one statement. Hashem could have said one word. He could have just said, let there be existence, let there be everything, let there be all the details, and boom, it would have all been. So why was it created in 10 and not in 1? And then it gives us an explanation about the wicked and about the righteous. So Hasidus explains that don't just read it as a question, that it's possible the world could have been created with one statement. No, the world was created on a certain level with one statement. And then it was created in 10. In other words, the question itself is a particular type of a level. Similarly over here, the simple reading of the Medrash is, there's a question, which is a very peculiar question, but the question is, I don't know what Hashem desires, the actions of the righteous or the actions of the wicked. And then we bring a pasuk, a verse, and another verse, and we say, oh, so you see that Hashem really desires the behavior of the righteous. Here we're saying, no. When you're saying that question, it's not just to be read as a question, but that's actually a particular level. When it says, and I still don't know which one he desires, that's a truth.
So koach ma? Is this, Rabbi Turen, is this like koach ma?
No, what do you mean by koach ma?
Beginning of wisdom, saying ma, what is this? Okay.
No. Okay, but okay, no, but that would be a good example. Okay. That would be, it's being recorded. That would be a good example that that when we say ma, it's generally a question of what. Mm-hmm. And comes Chassidus and says, no, that is a level. That is, ma is a positive statement of bitul, of self, of ego negate. That's true. That's right. The same idea.
Thank you.
So I still don't know which one he desires. That's referring to the level that the idolaters are receiving energy and everything from godliness on that level. Umisham nimshach liyois, and from there it's drawn down to become bechinas leman sfois harava, that it satiates, it satisfies, it quenches the thirst of the thirsty. Even though they're going in the way of their stubborn heart, meaning they're following their evil inclination, their stubborn heart, and still Hashem grants them. Why? Because they're receiving from a level that I don't know which one he wants. Masha'ein Kain, which is not the case, however, in contrast, be Yisrael, when it comes to the Jewish nation. Ve'ameich kulam tzadikim. And we say Jewish people, so that's all the Jews, because, as the verse says, and your nation are all righteous. So even though one can make the argument and say, what do you mean? Amongst the Jewish people, you have tzadikim and rishayim. So we're saying, no, we're speaking over in a much more general sense, and we're speaking about the oivdei avodah zara as the nations of the world, and the Jewish people are all in the category of tzadikim, meaning when it comes to the Jewish people, Hashem is much more particular of their behavior and therefore of how and how much they receive. Shemikabelim, that the Jewish people receive, mibechinas pnimius, from the innermost, the face, the eyes, the direct revelation of Hashem. Visham, and over there in the pnimius, hu bechinas, that is the level of Vayar Elokim es ha'or dafka kitoiv, that Hashem specifically saw that light is good. And there we have a differentiation. Light is good, dark is bad, and Hashem tells us all of these positive things, all the negative things, and specifically the behavior of tzaddikim is what he wants. Al derech, along the same lines of what the verse says, Lo yoive Hashem sloyach loy dafka. So the verse that says that Hashem will not want to forgive him, and the Tzemach Tzedek is seemingly emphasizing the word loy, which means him. In other words, it's specifically that individual that we're talking about, the Jewish sinner, that Hashem does not want to forgive. Why? Because he's not from the backside. If the person is receiving, or the nation is receiving from the backside, so it's like Hashem says, I don't care about you. So here, take a lot. Go ahead. So he's not particular, and he's not, going to give him according to his behavior or his earnings, because he doesn't care about him. See, a lot of times, it's when you care about someone, whether it's a friend, whether it's a parent that you're dealing with, a child, whatever it may be, you're being so meticulous and so specific because you care about them. And if it's someone that you could care less about, so you just can spoil them because you don't care. So it's not coming from a, so to say, a kind place, it's coming from a careless place. Ki'im, but rather, mi bechinas panim, they're receiving from the inner. Asher bechinas yoyer Hashem panav hu elecha dafka. Again, the verse in the priestly blessing says that Hashem is going to shine panav, simply translated as his face, but we're saying that means pnimius, to you. Says the Tzemach Tzedek, to you specifically, as opposed to the others, to the idolaters. Just like we're saying that Hashem does not want to forgive loy, him, so too we're saying that Hashem is going to shine from his panim to you specifically. Hainu lebechinas atzmeya liyotzra, meaning to the one that is thirsty for her maker, for her creator, for Hashem. But not to the one that is like not interested. All right, so again, this is the same point that we're making over and over again. Okay, we actually have only two more pieces left for this section on the whole thing. This was the first of a whole bunch of well, this was actually, what we just did now is the third one that we're talking about, the nations of the world. No, sorry. No, not the third one. This was about number 2, Kabbalah's Chiyusam, how and why the nations of the world, especially the idolators, receive so much, and why does it seem so unfair? So this is what we're explaining time and again. So that brings us now to the top of page Tov Kuf Chaf Dalet, next page, 524. Says the Tzemach Tzedek. V'ayin, that's what that stands for. V'ayin, and take a look. It's a little bit, it's funny because the word is ayin, which is spelled ayin yud yud, final nun, which means take a deep look. And the letter is actually called ayin. So the abbreviation for the word ayin is the letter ayin. So when it says over here vav ayin with that apostrophe, it really means the ayin, not the letter, but take a look. Okay, now the next acronym is not what it usually would be. Chaf Hey Gimel. James, what do you think that would normally be? Chaf Hey.
The Gimel.
Chaf Hey Gimel.
Like the. Not the Gimel Klipot. That would be different, reversed.
Normally, what the acronym of Chaf Hey Gimel would be normally is Kohen Gadol, the high priest.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Okay. Well, not in this case, though.
Okay.
Here, it stands for 2 Aramaic words. Kehai.
Gavna?
Yes. Kehai Gavna, which means similar to this, just like this. So, the ayin, take a look. Kehai Gavna, similar to what we're talking about. The Zohar. In the Zohar, the Haramaz, that is one of the main Kabbalistic commentators. Reish Parashas, in the beginning of the section, Shmini. In the Zohar, in the beginning of, actually in the Ramaz, the beginning of Shmini, Taf Lamed Vav Amud Beis, page 36b. The Yisrael, and this is a quote from there, and the Jewish people, al gav, even though, and sometimes it'll have, instead of a gimel at the end, it'll have a pei, which means af al pi. They both mean the exact same thing. Af al gav, although dilomachsharon uvdin, even though their behavior is not proper, kulu, all of them, though, misitra diamina, is from the right side, koatzin, that they come chuli. In other words, no matter what, it's all from the right side. V'daf lamed zayin amud aleph, and on page 37a, mashal, mashal leben noyach. So it's a parable to a Noachide, chulu, etc. Daha taninan, for we learned the is yamina vis smala chulu, because there's the right and there's the left. Okay, so now he's going to explain. Ukmoi kain, likewise, hahefresh, the difference, lenidoin zeh, to what we're talking about over here, Ramaz Sham, as the Ramaz wrote. So we'll soon explain. Abel Kishi Israel, but when the Jewish people, Hamushrashim, which are rooted, Be'atzmus Hachayim, in the very core essence of life itself, of Hashem, Yechatu Chalila, when they sin, heaven forbid, Oz, then Noiflim L'Seicha Sitra Achra, they fall into the negative side, the other side, the opposite of holiness, and they actually add vitality and strength to the other side. In other words, it's worse when a Jew sins than when a Ben Noach sins. The Gam, Piresh Sham, and also he explains over there, the Ramaz explains, the Yamina, the right side, V'olam HaToyu, and the world of Toyu, Nikra Kuloi Sitra Dismalo Ayin Sham. It's all called the side of the left. V'lachein Dafka, and therefore, specifically, whom? Those that worship stars, constellations, Shehem Misitra Dismalo, which they come from the left side, Yuchlu L'kabel Chayus, that's why they're able to receive vitality and life me'olam ha'toyu, from this very high world of toyu. Al derech nefilas ha'or, similar to the fact that the light of toyu fell down into the Sitra Achra. In other words, he's explaining how is it that the idolators receive from such a lofty, such a high level of toyu. He says because that's exactly the same idea. Because the world of toyu is referred to as the left side, and even though up there left is all positive, or it's even beyond higher than positive and negative, but the way it comes down is into the falling down and falling into the Sitra Achra. And the same thing, those that worship Avodah Zarah, idolatry, that's the Sitra Achra side, so that would be the left side. Masha'ein Kein Neshamas Yisrael, which is not the case, though, by the Jewish souls. Shehem Misitra Diamina, they're from the right side. Therefore, Efshar Lahem, it is impossible for them, lekabel misham, to receive from there. So that's why the Jews can't receive from Toihu. Ki'im, only mibechinas yamina, from the right side. Shu olam hatikun, which is the world of tikkun, of rectification, which is in fact the lower world. Vishar shoy mizeh, and its root is from this. De Ava, that Abba ve'ima, which is the Kabbalistic terminology for Chachma and Bina, father and mother. So De Ava, that Chachma and Bina. Malbishim lazroyois, they are the garments for the arms, De Arich Anpin, of the level of long face, which is the lower level, the external part of Keser, which would be Chesed v'Gvura Shaloi, the Chesed, the kindness, and the Gvura, the severity of it. In other words, Chachma is the source, or it's in line with Chesed, with kindness. Bina is the source, or in line with Gvura, with severity. And therefore, Chachma and Bina become, so to say, the right and left arm of Arich Anpin, meaning she'af al pi, that even though shehem shnayim, they're two. It's Abba and Ima. It's Chesed and Gevura. Nikroim echad. They're still called one. K'mashakasuv, as it says, be'idra rabba. That's a section in the Zoyar. Leis smala behai atika. There is no left in this level of atik. Now, even though atik is the inner level of Keser, it's the higher level beyond Arich Anpin, but the idea is that in Keser, there is no left side. So even though when it comes out of Keser, and it comes down to the lower levels, it then takes on this form of two arms, right and left, but really it's still called Echad, one. Kain Kosav Haramaz Sham. This is what the Ramaz writes there. Nimtza Liyois, so comes out to be Mibchinas Yamina, from the right side. So the Jews are really connected only to the right side. And I don't mean politically necessarily. Lachain, therefore, Lo Yoiv Hashem, Hashem does not want Sloyach Loy Dafka, to forgive him specifically. It's the Jew that Hashem does not want to forgive if he does something wrong. It's not just so easy to just ignore it or erase it. And when he wants to bring up that should be overbearing the spirit from the left side, in other words, to do something inappropriate, something wrong, to sin, which is from the left at the Sitra Achra, Yum Shachalav Hadin. So then, upon the Jew will come harsh judgment, Mibechinas Olam Atikun, which is coming from the world of rectification, as it says over there. So basically, there's a lot of deep Kabbalah here, but basically, to try to really put it in very simple terms, when it comes to the Jew, since he's receiving in a direct way, and in a way where Hashem, so to say, cares, therefore, he has to earn and he has to deserve. And when he misbehaves, when he sins, so then Hashem behaves and is harsh with him because he cares for him. Unlike the Oivdei Avodah Zarah, the idolators, they're connected to the left side, and that's the other side, and therefore they can receive from higher, which seems to be a benefit, but really it's not, a good thing, even though it looks like they're getting, and they're, why is the sinner having a good life, etc. Okay, let's see if we can run through the next piece, because that way we will have concluded this whole section. So we're on the bottom of Tov Buf Chav Dalet, second half of the page. Hine Ksiv. Behold, it is written, the verse states, Ram al kol goyim Hashem. Hashem is exalted above all the nations. She'etzel akum, for by the nations, by the idolators, Rochek Hashem mehem. Hashem is far from them. Therefore, we're saying he's exalted. He's up there. There's a distance. Aval, however, there's another verse that says, Mi kashem elikeinu b'chol kareinu chuli. Who, the Jewish people are saying, who is like Hashem, our Hashem, that whenever we call out to him, he's always there available and ready to hear us. So the verse is speaking about the Goyim, Hashem is distant and exalted. And the verse referring to the relationship the Jews have, he's always available for us. V'hatam, and the reason, ki yesh beis bechinois, because there are in fact two aspects. Soivev kol almin, umimali kol almin, which we've discussed in the past. They're all encompassing godly light, which gives life to everything equally, undifferentiated. And then the one that fills every world and every level and every vessel according to its capacity, the differentiated godly energy. Ve'hein beis deis hanal, and they are actually the two above mentioned opinions, if you will, the two views. One of them being the view of the nations of the world, and one being of the Jewish people. The Umot haOlam, the nations of the world, ein yicholim, rak, they are unable to, it should be to receive, as it brings down in the asterisks in the bottom, in the manuscript, it's missing a word. It doesn't say, but seemingly the meaning over here is they're only able to receive mi bechinas memale kol almin. From the memale. And after many down chains, ya'an, because kiheim yesh v'davar nifrad mamish, because the nations of the world are an entity unto themselves. They have a feeling of their own existence, this sense of the ego, and therefore, from their perspective, they're really separate from the Creator. Rak, the only thing is, the Karule, they call him Elokad Elokaya. the Hashem of the gods. So they acknowledge him being the king of all kings, the master of all, but that's very distant. They don't deal with him directly. He's the CEO. We don't, deal with him. There's managers and all the various different officers, etc. Im Kain, if so, Mishum Hachi, because of this, Mibechinas hahashkacha habeis, from the second level of the providence, of the supervision, Eich Shalamata Hayesh. So their view is that down here, meaning the created beings, us, we are an entity, an existence, Ulamayla Ayin, and above, Hashem is referred to as non-existent. It is specifically in that way that they can receive, because they have the perception that we are yesh me'ayin. We are something, we are an existence, which comes from, quote unquote, nothing. And that's exactly why they can receive. It's because, it's not despite their ego, it's because of their ego. So they're able to receive an abundance from Hashem because they feel themselves to be an entity unto themselves. And that's the way they're working from Mimale, from the lower level of godliness, the way it fills everything.
But isn't that true of every Bria? Of every goof, of every body?
Well, in general, you're receiving from Mimale and Soivev. But we're saying, how is it that people that have, to a certain degree, a choice, how do they sin, the ultimate sin of Avodah Zarah, idolatry, and yet they're receiving from Hashem? How does that work? So we're saying because they're not totally denying his existence, and on the contrary, because they feel themselves to be entity unto themselves, that's why they're receiving. Because if you're somebody, well, then you got to receive. But the perspective of the higher level of the all-encompassing light, there it's the reverse. There, it's that up there, Hashem is the true existence, and down here, creation is really nothing. So then, like it says, this is a paraphrasing or a verse from Yecheskel, Ezekiel, where it speaks about the Maisa Merkava, the chariot, as it were, above. So it says there's a wheel within a wheel. That's Soivev. So from that aspect, ein yicholim lekabel rak mishu keli. So you can't receive, because if you are an ayin, so you're not a vessel to receive unless you are a vessel. And what's the vessel you need to be? Lebechinas bitul zeh. You have to be a proper receptacle for this truth of non-existence.
Yeah.
So the more a Jew feels himself as an egotistical entity, the more he's pushing away receiving from Hashem. And the more that the Jew feels that I am a non-entity outside of Hashem, and he has that feeling of what we call bitul, the more he's then able to receive. Shu Neshamas Yisrael, that is the Jewish souls. Kidichsiv, as the verse says, Ki atem hame'at, that you are the few. Meaning, the simple meaning of the verse is that the nations of the world are so many, and quantitatively speaking, you're so few. The Jewish people are the least, and you're such a minority. But here we're saying, no, it's a positive thing we're saying. That what does it mean you're the ma'at? That they minimize themselves. The Jews are few, meaning not just in quantity, but we're few in our quality or in our feeling of self, because they minimize themselves in the feeling of bitul. Dehainu b'chinas bitul. V'lachein, and therefore, Kashem Elokeinu b'chol kareinu chulu. that Hashem is available to us whenever we call out to him. Meaning, the soivev kol alminu lamayla umato b'shaveh. Because when you speak about the soivev, then there's no such thing as a top and bottom, just like a circle. There's no top and bottom to it. There's no up and down. It's beyond. And that's the level of soivev. And that's why Hashem is always available. Which is not the case. Oh, it's really late. I'm holding you up, James. Sorry. Let's see if we can finish this up. No, okay. There's no point in just running. Okay, we're almost towards the end. So fine. So we're looking at next week, finishing this up and then moving on to the next part. Okay, let me just make a mark where we're up to. Okay. Fine. Well, we tried.
Yeah, that was excellent. That was a good one to finish. We haven't finished it, but that was that really has so much closure to what we've been going through and what I've been trying to learn and figure out. That's excellent about the bittul. Now, if you don't have bittul, then you can't receive and be a part of that depth of Hashem. It's like physically impossible. So that's wonderful. Yeah. Well, you know what I mean to understand. Yeah. Thank you so much, Rabbi Turen. And thank you, Yossi.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Be well.
I have a question, but I'm going to save it for later. Next.
Okay. Bye. Take care, bud.
Take care.